could ask a quick question from engineering, how do you feel about them taking out those bump outs? They made a big deal about that, breaking up kind of just that whole flat wall and tunnel.
The little triangles.
Yeah, it's an aesthetic thing, so it might be more related to planning. Engineering wise, it doesn't matter too much. We have found that if the wall gets put out on the back sidewalk, that's where the public utility easement is, and we often end up with a bump out the wall just to go around utility boxes.
Yeah.
So,
And they're filled with tumbleweeds.
so if we put that wall back, then it ends up being straight, then we don't have an issue with utility.
I just want to make sure, because that's going to be a pretty substantial walking path for children, I'm sure, that we have enough distance there on the sidewalks and those park strips to give them as much of a safe walking route as possible, being that we have, Athos Academy and the high school and the elementary school and, everything's right there. So that's my biggest concern as we talk about where that, how far back that ends up being.
My understanding is, and Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, this is coming to Planning Commission in January or February, so we'll be going through that process in the coming months.
So I don't know how anybody else feels about just that one little detail, but my 2 cents for Michael and everybody else is I like those little triangle bump outs just to break up the sideline.
Was that supposed to be a precast concrete wall? Is that what's on there?
That's a requirement on that size of road.
So yeah, I don't hate that. Well, you said it becomes a maintenance issue there.
Well, with the utility box bump outs, we get tumbleweeds caught behind there. As this area continues to develop, that goes away. But for now, we're going out there and cleaning up tumbleweeds a lot.
So would we expect a little cutouts and we have the same issue? Come on, Wendy, you're supposed to know everything.
Those triangles, I don't know.
We get lots of like, let's relook at that issue.
Yeah, it's something you can do with vegetation screening too, kind of give it a bump out feel, but that's not.
I mean, I don't have a problem with it as long as it creates a lot of.
We just, as you continue up that road, right, I mean, we've done a great job with the sidewalks and the park strip, et cetera. And it looks great now. In fact, I got another comment about it on Sunday. We know it's covered in snow here. We want you to know that we love the trees and the grass and everything there, but we run the risk of keeping the tunnel look. We just have to create some concrete walls.
Okay.
All right, so you all should be aware of what is an MDA and what is referred to as the regional White Barn Regional Park. This is a good time to discuss this because it was not in the old Parks Master Plan that we're updating right now. We've added it to the new master plan so it can be park impact fee eligible. And we're working with Zions right now. The question that we have is that the direction that you intend to go? Do you want this added to the Parks Impact Fee Master Plan, or the Parks Impact Fee Analysis and Park Impact Fee Facility Plan? And do you want it specifically called out in the Parks Master Plan? So I'm looking for direction on that.
What's the size of that thing supposed to be?
So we're gonna get to that. Let's get to that right now. There's the pretty picture that was in the MDA. And there's even horses there. So we have horses. We could bring Belle back. So this is a 3,200 square foot facility that has been proposed in the MDA.
Help me understand
Which
that in context.
the community room downstairs is 3,097.
And this is 30.
So you're basically replicating the community room and then adding a kitchen and restroom area.
Are we required to do the whole reception area? Like,
I don't think you're held by the MDA to do anything.
Was that, okay. So my recollection is what we talked about was developer wants to pay for something that grandiose, great. Otherwise, we do a pavilion that somewhat resembles a barn sort of.
So John, that's a question for you. This is the exhibit in the MDA.
I have to go back and read it. The whole thing, you know, I read the whole thing, or just, is this the section in it right now? Oh, that one, yeah.
I don't think that the MDA made us build a certain anything, it just said that we're gonna have this, and that was the picture that he drew and stuff like that. It could look like this, right?
That's what
Yeah, right there next to those steel cutout bison.
Yeah, well, my take is if you put it in an impact fee plan, you're gonna pay for it, you get it. If you don't put it in there, you're not. So basically, you can do what you want.
And you heard what Wendy said on the impact fee, capital facilities kind in plan. You can either put it as just generic as other facilities or such as that could be used for community uses, or you can really just spell it out, and then you're gonna say you are gonna build on that side.
I don't know about the other council members, but I've never considered it being an actual reception center there.
Exhibit H is from the MBA, right?
Yes.
Which is part of the MBA. So it shows proposed white barn is 3,200 square feet, but that doesn't mean that we have to make it 3,200 square feet.
If you don't put it in an impact fee, you don't have to do it. It's pretty clear to me there, I mean. But they still have to give us the profit.
So what would you propose on that corner?
Well, it depends on, what I'm trying to understand, I guess, is the intent of what you want, so we can put it in one way or the other, and so that we can communicate it to because the residents are already asking us about it.
Right.
Yeah.
They're attending community meetings, and they're asking,
Like,
when
where's
is
the
the
white
barn
barn?
gonna be built? When is the white barn gonna be built? Well, I don't
Okay,
know.
we're just bringing you information, because where are you gonna put your dollars of the impact fees that we will collect? What's the best interest of that area and this?
I don't wanna build a building unless the developer's paying for it. If it's impact fees, it's a park with a pavilion that resembles.
The way I read that, the only way we get it is
Yes.
if it is impact fee eligible.
No.
That's the
Well,
only
I
way
don't,
we
I don't
get
want,
it.
I don't wanna build.
So Tammy had a good point, and when we discussed this, in the NBA, it talks about it being a regional park. Our classification, this is not a regional park.
No, it's not.
It doesn't fit the standard of the size. So that's their problem. They call it out as such, but it's not our, regional park is a lot bigger than across from the region.
Well, when we originally talked about this, and correct me if I'm wrong, my recollection was that it was going to be, that the main park was gonna be twice as big. This was gonna be the centerpiece in the middle of a 40-acre park, and it was much, connected to the other 40-some acres on the other side. That was the idea of a regional park, and as it changed, got whittled down, Doug just wanted this park to go in, cause it's on the corner when they started building, cause he was promising all those nice lots for the Parade of Homes, in a couple of months, and none of that ever happened. So where it's not spelled out that you have to build that building, I don't.
We're just looking for direction, because your team here feels like it'll look nice on that corner, it really would. But what's the good use of the dollars, and does it really make sense for that area when those dollars could be spent on a more regional effect and multiple areas?
How many soccer fields could you put there?
7 point, it depends.
No, I'm talking about the 2 acres.
2.5 less than the one.
The 2.5 acres, if you do parking,
We couldn't even get a soccer field.
you could get soccer fields on it.
You could
Not
get a
full
soccer.
size.
Not full size, you do maybe a 10U with parking and a bathroom.
But basically, a U10 is half of a 2 acre or so.
Well,
The way I read this though is, there's really nothing required of, the only thing that's required of the master developer is to build this if we make it impact fee eligible.
right.
What I'm not seeing in there is that we get anything else from him. If we don't make this impact fee eligible, there's no other requirements, at least in this exhibit that's shown right here, there's no other requirements of the master developer in there to provide really anything on this particular pad, is that correct?
How I read it is, if we put it in the plan and we decide to build it, then we get into a reimbursement agreement with the developer to build the barn
Right.
and the park amenity.
But if we don't do that,
If we don't put it in the
there's
plan.
no requirements of the master developer to do anything.
Anything, not even
Landscape,
grass.
anything?
Right, but if it's
No,
in
you'd
the
have to grass
plan,
it. You'd have to sod it and do some,
Okay, that's what you're getting.
That's what I'm trying to get to, is if we don't put this in to make it impact fee eligible, what do we get? What is required of the
Whatever's-
developer?
it'd just be whatever we designed in the plan. They could build it and we would get a reimbursement agreement with them, or we could build it ourselves. So if you look we'll collect about 2.25 million in park impact fees in that area. This project, Blake ran some engineer's estimate, did a really nice design, we're looking at about 2.5 million for the barn, and the landscaping and everything around.
And that doesn't even begin to touch the other,
That ignores the actual
That
park.
completely ignores the other half.
which that other park is 1.4 million, is that what we're looking
That's
at?
just the trail
That's just trail
with native landscaping,
with weeds.
yes.
This piece of the development was done just as a straight subdivision, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
And
this,
that's why
this
there's
open
no-
space you're seeing here is for the north side of the site.
Say that again.
This open space component is for the north side of the creek that got put over here. As part of the.
Doug, their density,
As the
they have
mark.
to give up.
It was
He
on
wants
the
it
north side of
preserved.
the thing.
So this piece of open space accounts for the required open space.
On the north side.
I don't.
So my point is that those normal open space requirements and some of the amenities and things that we're used to, that we will see on the north side, we're not gonna see on this side. Unless we enter into some type of reimbursement agreement with them of whatever it is we wanna put there.
Or we do it ourselves.
Or we do
don't
it
need to involve the
ourselves.
developer.
Right.
I do.
Otherwise, we get really nothing from them, other than maybe a grassed area.
I think if it was detention, they would be required to landscape, correct, Blake? They would be required, and there is some detention that's 2.5 acres, and there is some in the 7.7 acres that's required.
To make this site work, you have to put underground detention and the cover to make it effective forward for the barn. So that's at a cost because the barn will be over there.
You
Plus
get
all the parking, I mean, you have to have 106 parking stalls.
Yeah.
So,
It'll basically be overflow parking for the charter school.
I actually like the barn, so.
We love the
But
barn.
is this,
I don't think
I guess,
anybody questions
no, I'm
whether we
just
like
saying
it.
that, I don't think it was, I disagree that I think it was just for Doug's, marketing purposes, because I think it was, kind of a stamp on displaying some Herriman heritage type of thing. Obviously, it's not a heritage barn, it's gonna be something new or something like that, but I think part of the vision was it's a corner on a very main street in our city that just kind of preserves a little bit of a country feel. I think that was the intent behind it, and I think that that's why you're hearing residents say, hey, what's going on? How come this isn't coming? How come this isn't coming? That kind of a thing. And so to walk away from it, I think that we have to be able to explain, because this was a big deal in all the meetings. We have to be able to explain to the public, why are you walking away from this amenity? And but it's more than just that it's a community center or something like that. The idea was that it is, kind of the country feel, it's a barn kind of thing.
I don't disagree with anything you said. I think that the component that was missed in the original throw up the pretty picture is the cost
Oh,
involved
yeah.
in it and what it means for the development of all of the other open space over there in that area. And I think that's what we have to wrestle with is are we willing to take all of the impact fees from that area to do this and then have to come up with additional city funds
make a park.
to make a park that's functional with some other things on the other side.
And Clint, to that point, when we were having this discussion on the night of approval, I very specifically called that out when we were talking with Doug, and I said, who's paying for this? And I made it very clear that this is pretty, this looks pretty, all this looks very, very nice, but we're only getting it if us as a city is willing to pay for it. And so I called that out very specifically at that time, that, yeah, this looks great, but we still have to decide whether or not we're gonna be willing to pay for this down the road. And so I come to a point when, as we're now looking at it down the road, saying, are we willing to pay for this? I have a hard time justifying something when,
Yeah, I love
I love
the
it.
idea of it. I honestly do.
It would be
I think it
gorgeous.
is beautiful. I
But
love the idea of it and what it represents as far as what our heritage is here.
But with so many other
The
needs.
fiscal
Yeah.
responsibility of it is the challenge that I'm having right
Yeah, I
now.
don't disagree. I mean, tonight in the parks presentation, she talked about the need for a community center. So that would take care of the need for the community center, because it would be built, right? But, I agree, it's like, she also talked about a need that we have to have at least another 5 acres of developed parks. So that
Yeah.
up there would take care of it, so that's the question.
Oh, yeah.
Do we not have enough budget to do everything? What is?
I just need 130 million.
I'll go back and respectfully disagree with the intent. I think it was partial intent on the heritage sector, that was a big part of the discussion for residents. But the other half of the intent was his marketing. He told them that I wanna do the good part of Tetons first, right, the subdivision with the larger stakes and some nicer houses. And he sold them on the idea of this corner being kind of that standout piece, that he was going to build this and put all of this in. And then we got to that discussion of who's gonna pay for it, and it was, well, impact fees will. And then we said, well, we don't wanna be on the hook for everything, so it's worded somewhat ambiguously on purpose for us to kind of make this decision. Now, if the developer's not going to stand up and put his money where his mouth was to do what he said he was going to do, what, 2 years later? I mean, this was supposed to get underway like
Yeah.
the next day, remember?
Yeah.
Like he was gonna have homes done for the parade homes that, in just 3 or 4 months from then was in a big hurry and all that was done to get that there. So I think the intent is, well, it was kind of twofold. It was more or less a compromise on the heritage feel sort of thing. My personal opinion is that I'd rather spend put impact fees and the money towards things that residents can use, and if he wants to step up and come to an agreement on it, great, but.
So we're in the process of updating the impact fee analysis. So what I really need to know is, am I putting the barn in that analysis?
I think you're gonna take it out.
You what?
I think you're gonna take it out.
That's what I'm hearing.
To me, I don't see that at this time I'd be willing to commit the funds to do that, so I don't think it would be appropriate, in my opinion, to do it at this time. I'm one of 5.
Because the way I read it is if it goes in the impact fee
We have to
analysis,
do it.
then we have to do it between 51 and 151.
Is he at 50 yet?
No, he's not at zero.
Zero.
And that's
If there could be a
the thing,
negative,
it's one
that's where
thing
we'd be.
if we say, well, we can put it in there and maybe the funds present themselves
Yeah, that's
later.
what I was thinking.
And we can
But
do it,
can't.
but we can't, according to this, we can't do it unless we reopen the game.
Just don't put it in, then you don't have it.
I'd rather not put it in, and we can
work it out.
We can
I mean,
work
if we
it
can
out.
work it out, we
whatever
can work
need
it
to
out,
on
great.
2.5 acres.
I don't wanna commit the city to something that we don't.
Well, we've had a high concern, we've put a little bit of time to talk about this back and forth the last few weeks since our last council meeting. And it's hard to understand the magnitude why we gotta talk about the white barn, because it's gonna take a lot of funds to do it, it's gonna take away from our projects. And those decisions are the council's. You're gonna take the interest of the body of the public, whatever decision is made, and you want to make sure you understand all of it. I still think it looked very beautiful down there, being a neighbor in that area, kind of like it. But it does not benefit a broader part of your community. It's a wonderful.
I don't think we should commit ourselves, I don't wanna take it completely off the table, but obviously by putting it in, it really, it commits us, and I'm not willing to commit us at this point.
Does it commit it to Exhibit H, or does it just commit us to, so everything listed on Exhibit A? We have to do a 3,200 square foot barn, we have to do
Is
the
that
details?
correct, John?
That's the way I read it.
Okay,
Again, once this project's done, we own the property, so if the day comes up, we have money, we can always go build it later. So it's not like this is a final for us, the city could choose
the
another
arts
day.
council, that's what we're doing.
Yeah, I'm the only one who thinks it seems really weird that the developer comes in and says, tell you what, let's build this wonderful thing, I got this great idea, it's amazing, and I'll do it as soon as you pay for it.
Welcome
All
to
parts
the
of it.
world of.
All parts
So
of
you
it.
gotta understand,
But then they'll take credit.
he's not getting that quick sale, so he agreed to, I'll build it at the 50th lot, you're gonna pay.
If he wants a big barn, pay for it, otherwise, stop.
This is the ongoing, what you get to deal with for the next 4 years.
That's part of pacifying the problem.
I just wanna thank Blake for his amazing design, I have to say,
It's pretty.
he really did a nice job.
Beautiful.
It was fun to
Too.
jump into doing that again for a minute.
So maybe in the future, this will come to fruition, we'll keep it on file.
I agree with Clint, I don't wanna take it completely off the table, I'm not comfortable committing the city to something that it may not be the right thing for us, right? Especially with all the other commitments we need to.
We should have noticed that, we should have Xed that out.
And then maybe in 5 years, when we're redoing the impact fee analysis.
Great.
Look at it.
Then he might be past the
Yeah,
100.
that's true. That's true. Okay, so I think we have our direction on that. Thank you.
Okay.
Um,
Alright. Well, you get to stay up there, Wendy, cause we're gonna
Yeah.
start talking about Tour Utah.
It's gonna be really quick because
Kinda
I
long.
thought I'd have an update, but I don't. So,
They haven't picked the site yet?
well, they've done some selecting, but there's nothing we can say. And,
So no update.
so no update today.
Okay, awesome. We will move on before somebody gets themselves in trouble. 3.9 McHouston Avenue project update.
Yay!
Yay,
Are you ready for the fastest
Why don't
Houston?
you talk over the people that are here so that we don't say something we're not supposed to say and get ourselves in trouble?
Okay, this is a one slide deal. Here we go.
Presentation.
What? This is the first time this has ever happened.
Oh, it's not working, Mitch.
It's truly a one slide.
Did this get turned off? There we go. All right, one slide. I put some colors on it to make it exciting. Some dates. All I want to say is we don't want to talk about this till July when it's done.
And it turns off, wow.
We're gonna go out to bid here the winter. We got our consultant.
No, you say, stop talking, you say.
Stop.
I missed it.
He said we're not gonna talk about it till it's done.
We're hoping to get out and do some utilities in spring and pave as soon as we can and get it done and be done with it. We're gonna have a food truck butt party, right?
10+ years.
We know.
And thank you, Sherry, and everybody getting this done.
Yes.
It's been
When are we gonna
It's hard
do
to
cheese?
pass.
When it's done,
Don't
you're gonna get credit.
That's right. Come in. See what happens.
So. Alright, so anything else that we need to talk about that?
Until we start keeping.
There's just one other thing. If we choose to do any of the roads, like in Houston in the future, I reached out and talked to a right-of-way consultant that does this kind of work. They've done this work in Bluffdale, American Fork, all over Utah County. And I would recommend working with a right-of-way acquisition consultant
It's good to know.
to do that work in the future. If we choose to do any other roads that are like in the future.
And we'll have to, we won't even be a choice at some point, we'll have to do it.
It just makes it so much smoother.
Okay.
Cool, awesome.
Alright, so we will move on to item 310, discussion relating to the Unified Fire Authority interlocal cooperative agreement. Brett and Jared. We're gonna sit here and awkwardly stare at this.
Hey, you two.
You.
Yes, you guys.
His name's listed first. Start talking.
Unified Fire.
It's after 10, we're watching it go up.
Really?
Does say that
Alright.
would.
So, emailed you guys all the interlocal. I don't know. I don't even know where to start with this. I feel like we're a year or two behind there. So we've got two organizations, UFA and UFSA, the service area. UFA is wanting a new interlocal approved. UFSA is wanting a new bond approved this spring. My understanding, we're looking for February approval of both is what I'm, at least is my understanding. So I
Correct.
keep looking at you to make sure I've got this information. I've been to 2 meetings to get all of this. I've met with a few other board members outside of that to try to gain some of their knowledge.
My understanding, they want to go for a general obligation bond. And they got definitely certain stations picked out to start off with, and one of them is rebuild 103. So, and they're also looking at phase 2 of that, they're looking at, I'm losing count of the number, and I'm looking at Clinton Hill, but I think it's gonna be 128.
Yeah, it's Rosecrest.
Maybe the next new one. I think you're right, down there.
Yeah, I'm here.
Chief, is that correct?
That's correct.
Looking at that Rose,
112,
Canyon.
103, 128.
So,
You can say all those numbers you want. I have no idea where those are.
Olympus
we're
Hills.
gonna get you there.
112 is
I told you I'd
Oak Creek.
probably get you around, including with all the stations on.
103, depending on what happens to Olympia, and then 128 would be Rosecrest, which is
And
or
they
Rose
wanna,
Creek up the canyon.
definitely 103 is like number 2 or 3 on the
It
list,
is,
because of its,
Yeah.
it back and see each one of the service, doing a good job, but it was never meant to do what it's been doing for 20 years.
It was a volunteer station.
Yeah.
So,
And my understanding is that we own the property underneath the
Correct.
building and the garage, but not the.
no, we own the property. There's no garage on that building. We have the restroom behind in the pavilion. The garage, the bay, is all by fire service area. When the county run the fire department and the volunteer department, they deed the building to by fire service area and the property, because it's got convoluted, it's owned just by the school district and the church, and then somehow.
Yeah, see, I've heard like 6 different stories, so. Who's your board members?
So, and then we have to.
My understanding is the ground is Herriman's, the building is theirs.
Right. So we still own ownership of that, and we own interest, not by name, but by, ethics and process. We paid for half the property up Herriman Boulevard. The total price for takedown was $425, I believe that what it was. We paid just at $200,000, was the Herriman $200,000 on that property. And they have their name on, they know that, where my Facebook, she wants, was trying to get all that updated. And then developer for this one donated all the property, almost 4 acres at 123. They're utilizing about 1.5 acres. They need to do something with their big half. They know that's part of our community donation, so we have interest in that. But to update you on that, so everyone's aware, they're looking at, because the response time, particularly on the medical side, the phone in, whether they really want to get onto, and after they receive the call at the station, get out the door and get on the scene. 103 where it's currently at makes the most sense, that response time.
To stay back.
And so we're looking at, working with Unified Fire to say, what would that look like? Because I'm pretty passionate for heritage on that location. That's the old auditorium on the school side. We've actually pulled all those old pictures out, and so I think we built a fire station to make it look similar like that. And reserve, because those trees on the east side of the station are there when the school is in place. So we're working with them on how to capture that if it's gonna be rebuilt. If it doesn't get built there, it's gonna make it a historical area. We need a park lot for that park anyway. So, they're local.
So, the last board meeting, they.
John wants to jump in, hold on.
So,
There's a lot going on.
yeah, I've read it about 10 times, and it is a massive change.
Right?
And I don't think we can do it justice in an hour or 2 hours. I mean, it's gonna take a long time to go through it.
Yeah.
You know, there's 3 components when you create an entity like this. One is the formation that's done. 2 is the operation, and that's where a lot of their guts or where their changes are. And then an exit plan. They basically just thrown everything to the wind on the exit plan.
They basically said there is no exit.
There is no equity. is what they're saying.
Your notice.
Well, there's a lot more to it than that for sure.
And you get nothing back.
The short end of it is, as far as I guess it's hard to describe on the whiteboard, but with the 2 entities, right? So I feel like you have to start with UFSA first. That's where the money comes from, the funding.
Yeah.
Right? And so and I don't want to draw close comparisons with UPD because to me it's a completely different animal. But as far as the funding mechanism, that was basically the same as Slovisa.
That's first.
Right? It collects the money and then that board decides how the money is spent. The board's made up of several members, and then there's other members of UFA that are not members of UFSA, so it's not the exact same body of decision makers. You have some cities that are just, they call them contract with UFA, but it's not a contract, it's an interlocal. From my point of view and from the state auditor's point of view, interlocals are not the best way to enter into these service agreements. Contract for services is better as far as transparency and accountability to taxpayers, right? Knowing what you're getting for it. So I guess I'm a little biased after our last experience entering into these convoluted interlocal agreements to provide what should be simple services that's disconnected from the funding mechanism and the people deciding how to fund it. It's just a lot of that part that doesn't make sense. Where I feel we're a year or 2 behind is they've been talking about these changes for a year or 2.
Yeah, strongly for the last 6 months before.
Yeah, especially this year, that's been the push, is to get these two things done. They want this bond done so they can rebuild a bunch of stations, Mill Creek and aging ones, and build one out here for us. There's other cities that don't get much out of the bond itself, but they're paying for it.
This bond, last bond they did.
Yeah, that's the thing, I don't have that institutional knowledge on that part. So they're looking at they're gonna want, I don't even know how the bond works, if every city has to vote, yeah, we're okay with that bond, or it's just the board, it's just the board.
Obligation bonds, it's a
It's
general
public.
vote
It's a
of the
public vote.
population.
Public.
The public has to vote on general obligation.
Yeah, when they say
Because it
general
attaches-
obligation, that's called the public.
The taxes of their house.
If it's a sales tax bond, which they don't mean sales tax.
Which then they're gonna wanna come to each entity and get us to do a resolution in support of it, et cetera.
Correct.
So that's what they're gonna want early on, right, and whatever the process is in February is, I think, what they've been throwing out.
So
'Cause then they
Riley,
have
do you
to go
know,
through
are they
truth and
planning
taxation.
on doing their own, I guess, election to push this
That'll
out?
be November, so
Not next year.
February's
Okay.
discussion is just to decide, once all the new board members are in place, which course of action they wanna start pursuing. So they're not making a decision in February, however, they're gonna start the discussion with all the right players in the room to decide what they
Yeah,
feel is the
really
best
can't
course
go
of
out
action.
on
Yeah, we can't do
money
anything until,
a
How many
year
new
from
how many new
2021.
board members are you actually getting in this cycle there
I don't
on,
think there's very many, I actually think it's a pretty small number. I think we're between like, maybe a maximum of 3 or 4. I actually don't think the turnover's that high.
for the full board?
The sense that I got reading the room last 2 meetings was that they're pretty confident of these things just moving forward. It was just deciding on a couple of details.
Yeah, they don't
And the
wanna move
Public
until-
does have a strong interest in voting for things for public safety, and you see that across the state, and everybody that has a station that's inferior to give good service. I mean, we can't house too much more than what's there right now, and it's trying to put both on that station very well.
Yeah.
And it's done a wonderful job of what it has been.
Well, and the bond discussion's been going on for about a year. It's been close to that too, and the new construction
And as we
discussion
grow,
came up, so.
that station needs other apparatus, and in the future, we'll probably need as we build out, get that closer to our population, a truck. And
I don't think
we'll
there's
need
any
our,
denying
ones and those type of
need
things.
for emergency services,
It's just how do we go
is it
about
the
it?
right way
But I
to
need
do
to
it?
I promised Jared to get some road trips and get around to all the stations so he can start to memorize what capacities are out there. And he's, just like you said, he's right, just come in as, I would agree, we need to let him get more immersed in this interlocal and understand organization more before we pass it.
So I wanna bring all of this to you guys, cause I'm gonna be calling every one of you to say, how do you want me to vote when this stuff
Yeah.
comes up?
Well, and honestly, I think John had a very valid point, and that is that this isn't just a few-minute discussion for us to all be able to give you the necessary input that you need.
No, that's not
To be
what I'm
able to
asking.
Right, and so we need to find the time, give you some more time, obviously, to immerse yourself in it, but also find the appropriate amount of time for us to really be able to all go, talk about all of the details of this and the potential implications both ways to our community long-term.
Then I talked about this on the way in today, I said, yep, I glossed over a couple of times, cause it is nothing, it's some pretty heavy reading, and just to make sure, to understand it all, it definitely is. It would be a lot of.
I definitely like to see you understand it before you pass it.
Yeah, me too.
But
I'd love
at the end of
to,
the day,
yeah.
it's pretty clear.
Spend some time with you.
You have to give so much notice, or they can still bill you or take you for those monies. And if anyone leaves, if anyone knows anything about fire, it takes you a year to prepare anyway, if you decide to go.
Well,
It's just
so-
different dynamic.
To go to the leading question, right, so that's the question everybody always asks of Riverton and Herriman because of the PD.
Right.
Well, I'll state my personal opinion is that it's important for us to control the money. So wherever the service comes from, whether it's if we could do the same thing with the garbage district, whatever, I think having that transparency and accountability to the taxpayers and are you getting what you're paying for starts with actually controlling the money. It just goes into a big pot that we don't control, we're outvoted on basically. we don't control where that money goes, and then we don't control the services we get in return. So the reason I wanted to kind of bring this up is that with the bond coming up, if a bond is passed, that basically, my understanding of the legislation was passed a few years ago, is that even if we were to leave the service district, there's a couple of things, we have to do a feasibility study, et cetera, go through a couple of hurdles, but we're still obligated for our share of the agency, not just our share of what we benefit from, but our percentage share of the whole agency. So agreeing to a bond, when that's one of the main things that we're looking at with every one of our service areas is, okay, are we getting what we're paying for? That's kind of the first piece I want to throw at you to kind of consider as we start talking about this bond, looking at this, like the service area itself.
And this interlocal letter doesn't really talk about, it does, but it doesn't really spell out as clear as I think it should about, you know, we know we're a fast growth city out of the whole organization, us, Eagle Mountain, are the two biggest ones in fast growth. And, Unified Fire Service area adopted an impact fee, and they're able, because their capital facilities plan spells out, they can pay for stations, but they can also buy the larger apparatus with that. When you talk about a truck, which is a ladder truck, it's $1 million purchase at that.
They're about
And
one
that's-
point two.
That's
And
an
a long
important
lead
distinction
time,
as well.
Huh?
And a long lead time.
Most of them
So
are about
the point
14
we
to 16 months out from the day you
So where
order
I was going with that is this, because we have a lot of building, our impact fees are being collected here more to benefit the whole region. And now, since if you do separate, is how much we're really gonna spend here over the years. And there might not be any debt.
And that, this is where it gets muddy
But it's just,
in these
it doesn't
conversations,
make
is
it
when
clear.
you start to talk, you kind of merge the two, UFA and UFSA, they're completely separate, right? So
Yes.
UFSA is the funding vehicle, and my understanding is that they basically own the property and the buildings.
Correct.
UFSA owns the apparatus and equipment, et cetera, to provide the
And they do all the
services.
maintenance.
So it's easy to just lump it all together, but that's not what it is, it's not really what it's even intended to be, but then a lot of times it's how it's treated. So, if it's okay if I jump over to the other side, the UFA part with the interlocal, just separate from the funding mechanism and the bonds. My reading of the interlocal so far, and I have no idea what I'm looking at as much as John does, but I look at that versus the old one, like what problem are they trying, I mean, we've had this conversation, what problem are they trying to solve?
We're trying to solve the Herriman River
And it seems like they're trying to solve the problem of we don't want anybody to leak
Exactly.
the problem. And this is just my interpretation so far, and this doesn't mean it's good or bad or the other. Other partners I've talked to have said, you know what, it's fine for what it is, and if anybody wanted to leave, we work through it, spells some things out, but it's maybe not as advantageous, but it might be okay that way. At the same time, those conversations I've had have been, you know what, with the changes that have been made the last few years with Chief Peterson and his leadership, like the service part of UFA is fantastic, and nobody really has an issue there. I think most people are just looking at the money, right, controlling the funds and making sure that the stations are where we want them in our city that makes sense, and you have kind of that sense of ownership. The interlocal itself, the board passed it to be sent to the councils to look at and consider. And I think they're asking that we ratify it by February in anticipation of all of this, so that's why I was like, we need to start having this discussion and thinking about all this. To me, the conversations I've had, that's kind of the main thing that's driving it, and to get people on board, this is my interpretation, so I apologize if correct me if I'm wrong, and I apologize to anybody that watches this later or is watching now, if I mischaracterize it or whatnot, just call me. And tell me how it was wrong, but the way I'm looking at it in my very blunt and direct way is that we wanna get this done so that we don't have to worry about anybody, the interlocal, anybody leaving. If they do, it's more spelled out and fine. But the way we're gonna get everybody there is to do a weighted voting, right? Because everybody, I shouldn't say everybody, there's a sense that there's a disproportionate weight towards the county versus the member cities, etc. So a compromise that was brought forward, when got this task a couple months ago, Brad arranged a meeting with Chief Peterson and I sat down and he explained the weighted voting options that they were looking at. And they didn't make any sense to me. They wanted to go all population, but then the county didn't like that because they don't have much population left, right? There's just a few pockets of unincorporated. but they are contributing a lot more money, right, than any individual, so they wanted that reflected, so they're trying to come up with a combination of partial weighting by population, partial weighting by funding, and I told them that meeting, like, well, if you're gonna try to combine them, why not just do 50-50? And that's kind of what they have arrived at. And so they gave us some preliminary numbers, and it was in the information I sent you guys, but I just wanted.
It's actually the same thing as fortune of these people.
Right, and it kind of worked out, as I did the math in my head, it's kind of worked out that way, so going forward, this is kind of, and this is, well, funding, okay. So, my concern is going forward, what this looks like right now, Mill Creek would have the largest weighted percentage vote. Let's say, member fee percentage, so the two, that's,
Member
I'm
fee
not reading this.
percentage, it's taxable value.
So we've got percentage of UFSA and then percentage of funding. Breakdown taxable value, percentage, voting percentages, here we go. So Mill Creek would have the largest voting percentage, so and not everything would be voted this way. It would only be on
Budgetary,
funding issues where
budgetary
there's a split
items.
vote, then it would come, then we do another round of voting by this percentage.
This actually,
Exactly.
this makes some pretty good balance to it though.
So
because
Mill Creek's the largest city with a combination of population 14.29%, member fee 17.97, weighted vote 16, Taylorsville at 12.8, Riverton at 10.6, Herriman at 9.3, unincorporated county at 9.2, Midvale 7.8, and on down to the townships at 0.15, etc. What I found interesting though is for most of the cities that are developing, population and the funding are gonna rise pretty much equally, right?
Absolutely.
It's the only place where it's out of balance is unincorporated county where there's low population and higher dollar amount. So if you look at the cities, they're gonna rise kind of the same as they grow. But looking at the other members, nobody has the same dynamics as us except for maybe Eagle Mountain. And by dynamics, I mean the growth
Rapid
projection.
growth.
Mill Creek is landlocked, their population's at 60,000. Right, and we're pushing that right now, the next census we push up, our build out is twice that. Taylorsville, same thing, landlocked, just shy of 60,000, Riverton at 44, they're landlocked, they're gonna top out at 55 or so. On down the line, the only one that could potentially grow a lot bigger is Eagle Mountain, and they'll be a long ways down. So where I'm going with this is my concern later on, we're gonna be twice the size of any of the other members. Our needs and interests are going to be a lot different than the other members, and we'll still be out.
And we'll still be, they're not gonna reassess those over time based on that population
Well,
growth.
it'll be based on, so we'll have a higher percentage
Just to
vote,
vote up,
but we
But
don't
still-
control our destiny. Right?
No,
And our needs and interests will be a lot different than
No,
the other
agreed,
members.
agreed.
the way to vote will change actually every year.
Yeah.
So I like the idea of the weighted vote, it's just that
It's actually come around to where what
in the
was.
future, build out, is it the structure that we're gonna want to look
Yeah,
at?
if we were approaching build out, we'd be right in the same area as most of the other cities that are already built out, but we're not gonna be doing anything like that.
It'd be double the size.
Yeah, and you think about what we're doing, the money out here, I do know this, Two Peterson watches that really close, and we were only three-handed in each station for a good while. They actually pulled the whole families out of this area. He redid some more numbers of call wise response times, and then he also looked at the money that is being collected per area, and he put four-handed in each station. And basically the fire chief 101, so you can understand what that means, but in essence, a four-handed, it's a good place to be, so it's three-handed, luxury is having a five-handed on a basic station. But yes, this station after eight-handed, because they're so busy. But, he's made a good attempt to make sure what's going to be collected out here is getting put back in this area.
To sum it all up, my concern's not so much with the organization itself, but in trying to analyze the stuff and give a recommendation to the council of the direction to go. With only 2 months into this and looking at this, I'm hesitant because it's a huge the interlocal itself's a big change from what it was. It's kind of clear what the intent is. There's pros and cons to it. The weighted voting seems to be kind of the driver to get everybody to go with it, and I feel that the weighted voting is a good thing, and we'd be fine for a while, but I guess the planner in me looks at the end result where we'll be. I'm more concerned about, you know, if we control it with this, we don't control the money. They're gonna tell us what money goes out of our area and how they disperse it and what service we get.
So how do we control the money?
Yeah.
Is
You have to get out of the service area, and do our own service area, and then we're just one of the other cities, of which there's 5 or 6, I can't remember how many.
become a contract city?
There's a holiday, Alta,
Contract city, right, so you control the money, and it's pretty clear this is what we're paying for, this is what services we want. But then it's still an interlocal, but at least you control the funds, right, and that's your leverage to make sure you get the service that you're supposed to.
So the same intent that we did with leaving Cedisa. However, this organization is actually providing services that we're paying,
Correct.
which is substantially different.
No, yeah, for those that didn't hear that's a big difference, is that
We're actually getting what we're paying for so far.
we're getting
Just
this,
like what you
we're
just
getting at, you know, adequate
indicated.
services as it is, and we don't have the problem with the services.
It seems really good, you know, and they also added dynamics back at peak call time.
Yeah.
He's making some adjustments this next cycle on reopening 120. When you have those other stations around you, you can have great backup.
What's your peak load ambulance out here, 99?
But I-
99 right now.
To that end, I am concerned about that growth component, with only a couple of areas in here that are high growth. That's where the new growth money comes from, and every one of these budget discussions that I sit in on, it's, new growth is the free money, basically, right? And there's hungry mouths to feed, to greedy old stations and that kind of stuff, and that's the part where if we don't control the money, we don't keep up with the.
So, kind of Jared's schedules, or this is more than mine, and those who want to go for road trips. There's some very interesting learning station 151 and 252, 124, 123, no, 120, knowing what their capacities are, helps you understand how the money's being spent, how to move the back things up, tells you that, use that global perspective, what the capacity of each station is, I think that's really valuable.
We're happy to facilitate that or take you around
So I have
and help you out with that.
2 things. One, until I read the new agreement, I had never really ever considered breaking ties with UFA or UFSA. The move to prevent an organization such as ourselves from leaving such an agreement rubs me the wrong way in a lot of ways. Trying to make it to where Herriman can't leave so that they can't, you know, we can't take our money with us, that really concerns me. The other, you know, and up until that point, I never thought twice about UFSA or UFA, because they've been great partners. But from a management standpoint of our own city, controlling our own destiny, that seriously concerns me. The other thing that you know, I think that we got to have, if we're talking about this, we've got to have as part of the discussion is, you know, at what point as a city is it worth us considering doing what some of the other cities that are of the size that we are going to be have done in creating our own fire department. I know that Draper's done it. I know that, you know, there's, you know, Lovedale has their own, South Jordan has their own. It makes, you know, is there, I'm not saying that's the right thing, but as we're having this conversation about, you know, whether or not we're even able to leave an organization in the future, you know, is that something that we need to discuss now and have that conversation? And up until I'd gotten this, the answer to me would have been no. But now that we may be losing the ability to make that decision in the future, I think we have to have that discussion now.
I would disagree that we're losing the ability to make that decision in the future.
Okay.
It changes the way, if you made that decision in the future, it would change the way that would happen. It changes the dynamics, etc. And quite frankly, I don't know that there's any way to avoid that. I mean, if the majority are going to pass this, we could definitely say, vote no, we're not going to. But what does that do?
I asked that question not on our legal, but their own legal, and no one has answered.
Nobody really knows.
Yes.
Right, so
They don't have that.
how many partners do we have in USA
16
itself?
total.
So
Yeah,
16.
and it was written for the intent to actually make it easier to get out, like if you read through it, it
So
actually
maybe I'm not
clarifies.
understanding it well
Gee.
enough.
It actually clarifies your ability and what you walk away with, it's way more clear than it was when these guys left, when Draper left, it was an absolute mess, and the interlocal was at that time designed
I can confirm.
to make it difficult. This interlocal makes it very clear, it's like, I'm reading it right now, it's like 8 pages of the process, and it spells it out in about 15 steps on exactly how you leave and what you leave with. It spells out the negotiable terms.
And if
So,
that's-
so it
if
doesn't
that's the
make it,
case,
it doesn't make it so that you can.
Yeah,
It changes the process of
The
that.
process.
it clarifies it,
The argument would be that
It does, it clarifies, cleans up what the process versus.
yeah, so it may sound like it's more
what the process
stuff,
would be.
I think it sounds like it's more stuff, but it's clarified it so they don't have the problems that Draper ran into, cause it was not clean and handled well when Draper left, and I think Chief Peterson's intent was to make this extremely clear on how you go about that process, and so it probably looks longer, cause at the time it was probably not that detailed. This is very detailed on the point A to point Z on how you would.
And to that point, they've been working on it for
Yeah.
a year or so with input of all of the members except for us. So the concerns that I'm looking at and having, this is, I guess, why I wanna have this conversation with you guys, is that the 2 meetings I've sat in on and the side meetings, I've had with a few board members, I'm looking at them going, I don't even know what to say to this. You guys have been working on this for a whole year, and even Chief Peterson mentioned it in one of the meetings, that we wanna try to get some of this stuff wrapped up, cause then we're gonna have several new board members that we're gonna have to break in, you know, come January, and we're gonna start all over again, and that's kinda how I feel at this point, is looking at going, yeah, there's several things in here I don't like, but we weren't at the table to tell them we didn't like those things. So that's almost kind of catch 22, so it doesn't prevent us from it, it changes the process. Spells it out.
Does it negative, I mean, does that
Depends on the way you
process,
look at it.
and that's the question is, I mean, if we were, say, 5 years down the road, you know, or even 10 years down the road, decide that we wanted to start our own fire department, I'm not saying that is,
So, okay, trust.
You can decide next year if you want to, this doesn't bind you to a time frame.
Right.
It binds you to the agreement, and if you wanted to leave 1 month after you signed it, you have the right to do that, you just
It just
follow the
binds you to the
process.
process.
Yeah, you just follow the process.
so maybe I need some more clarification on
Yeah.
exactly.
So that's what I would say, is I wanna kind of introduce it and
Yeah.
implore
Go
you
back
to,
and read it.
yes.
Highlight, make some notes.
And
What
I
I'm
can-
trying to get to is, okay, you saw that forecast agenda, we didn't put this back on the forecast agenda. But I can try to see we're gonna need more time. Where does it fit in? We have a,
We have 2 meetings in
third
January.
Wednesday in January, but we actually got a lot of training, we need to bring all council together, update on what's your training. And we're gonna try to contact David Church, have to do all those things. That whole meeting, we might be able to spend an hour or more again, or we could touch.
Are you talking
base.
the joint meeting that's scheduled the end of January?
Yes, because there's training that they need to have too.
Right.
Planning commission, and so we're trying to accomplish all that in one meeting. But we can either hold it to then, or touch upon our first and second council meetings in January, and keep getting comment made back from you all, and move it that way, and look for directions.
Is EFO still the administrator of UFSA?
It is.
Correct.
Is there any value in having him come and have a conversation with him from the UFSA side of things as the administrator of the direction that they're going?
I'll reach out to him, and he would have no problem with that.
But I think it would be better for that or anyone else to bring in if we were able to do some of our own homework and provide them with, here's our questions and
Right.
concerns.
No, absolutely.
And I'm sure, I can't think of his name right now, the legal, what's his name?
Brian?
Ryan Roberts?
Yeah, he would come in, cause he wrote it, he can kind of explain why.
So kind of what I'm thinking is as a follow-up, I'll send you all an email with kind of some bullet points of here's kind of my major concerns and sections, et cetera.
So what do you want? You wanna bring him in the first meeting in January? I would recommend not.
No. We need some time to disseminate and know what our questions and things are, but where they're gonna want to vote on this stuff in, February's board meeting, which is gonna be Tuesday the 18th of
February.
Yes, third, yeah.
So
third.
we would need to have a serious discussion and get any direction on what to do to our meeting prior to that.
That gives us 3 meetings to
Counter it out.
have some discussions here of our own, at a minimum.
We'll keep throwing on as a discussion item at the work meeting until we've got it worked out.
And then in the meantime, just exchange emails and concerns and questions.
Okay, well, moving on then, we will talk about item 3.12, discussion of surplus property adjacent to the auto mall.
We got that. There it is. So we had some discussion about the repository. This goes along with that.
Oh, it's a beautiful screen.
Yeah. So here's the property we're surplusing.
Very cool. Oh, there it is.
Okay, so it's a drainage ditch. It's basically the ravine. It's about 3.75 acres. It's on the north side of the auto mall property.
That's between the Winco and the auto mall, right?
Yep. So when you drive over Mountain View, it's there's a little bridge there, right?
Isn't that supposed to be open space, trail?
Well, yes, but let me just go through this.
All right.
So the property will be sold to Herriman 73, which is our auto mall partners, as part of the sale of the repository property, which is this property, for $665,613. There'll be no additional cash for this property, but there will be other consideration. The other consideration is that fuzzy stuff we added to the ordinance that's in the best interest of the city. And the best interest of the city is to have a contiguous, harmonious project. So this is them put together. This is all the property they're buying. That's our park we're gonna keep, but this is where the surplus property is. So it's the concept is it's gonna be contiguous, harmonious development of an auto mall on adjacent property. And it constitutes public policy factors that the council determines is in the best interest of the city.
Still have our trails and stuff in there?
Okay, now, there is exactly the things for the lead in. The city will retain a broad form easement on the property for use by the city and the general public. So, title will be held by somebody else. We'll basically have the right to use it however we want.
Part of the reason for this was that they could put amenities and maintain some of the things on there, but at the same time, we can do any of those amenities and do trail if we choose to, but we could have them be part of the maintenance as they develop amenities along the auto mall area. So that was the intent, was to try to blend in and not make it separate, oh, here's the city, here's this. This would be all big public kind of amenities there doing incorporated. In the meantime, the easement allows us, if we want to build something, we get to go build it. And they have to talk to us to build stuff.
Was there a change on the, did I just miss, was there a change on the repository?
I'm confused how it's connected. What are we trying to accomplish?
So what,
Well, it's part of this purchase.
so
Right.
we came in and we
Yeah, okay.
talked about to sell that. And one of the requests was, we're also buying all the property from us for the auto mall. But they wanted to get that sliver, so we have a purchase agreement that includes that 15 acres and that strip along the ravine. So that's one purchase agreement. The auto mall is a separate one, but this purchase agreement includes that strip. It's the idea that they can tie this in with the amenities, with whatever restaurants or things that go along.
So what they get is they get that piece of land along the ravine. What we get is we don't have to deal with this repository.
But also, the easement is a fairly broad easement that allows us to do what we want with that.
Public access.
Even though they may own it, we have to do anything we want. And that's what kind of what we talked
And
about.
they're on the hook for dealing with all of
The contaminated.
The contaminated soil is all theirs, they're buying that.
They get to buy it.
It's a good deal.
They own all the
It's a good deal.
contaminated soil.
We should, it's great land.
So-
It feel like in, or better than day long, they make it look better.
My question is, this has to go through the surplus process.
Yes, it's gonna go through the surplus process, and it will be surplus by an ordinance after public hearing.
We wanted to bring it to you.
But we wanted you to see it
Process,
first.
and then we'll bring it to you, Jay.
So if there's some concern, say concern, otherwise it's gonna.
And Larry's here, on the sixth as well.
We've already started construction on the trail,
Is there a particular zoning you're looking for?
so how does that?
We have no idea.
What's that?
The trail construction has already started.
Well, we own it, right?
Right.
Well, we had talked about this.
So to Wendy's point, the construction has started, and even with the, going through the surplus process, should it happen that way, the easement then kicks in and doesn't affect what they're already doing in the area, correct?
But the easement's broad enough to cover whatever we do on that property, and this closing's not gonna take place till 2024.
This allows them to come in later on and landscape.
Oh, 2024, okay. I hope you
For our
complete it by
approval,
then.
Hopefully it's done by,
But again, we can build anything on anytime we choose, even after the sale.
right now we own it.
And even afterwards, if it doesn't change.
And the developer is basically going out on a limb and
The
helping us.
repository is C2.
Did we change the zoning?
So the repository
We
is
did
C2
change the
right now,
master plan back to current zoning.
Yes, we can.
We did.
Already it's zoned C2, we just changed the map.
Yeah.
So
So
both
that's
things
what-
are,
there was
sorry about
something,
that.
but that's what I was hearing.
which is what I would expect.
Yeah.
So does that answer, do we get
So
direction
each
on
one-
this information?
This information, we're gonna bring it forward for the actual
What's that?
surplus.
Should we own the property since we're
Okay.
This will be in January.
Closing this.
Okay.
All right, we will then move on to item 3.13, discussion of resolution expressing Herriman's intent to study and consider participating in the Community Renewable Energy Act of the state of Utah. Tammy,
Okay, now that everybody's yawning and getting tired,
Let us put you completely to sleep.
I know. So I'll just pass out some of the information that's going around because you never know what's going to happen with
The screen.
the screen here. So at least if this kicks out, you'll have the basic information.
I know
This
what's gonna happen.
has
It's gonna
been,
kick out.
I know. This has been a topic of conversation in a lot of cities this month, because it does have a deadline for the resolution. I'm not sure how familiar with House Bill 411 you all are. It was passed during this last legislative session. It is about the Community Renewable Energy Act. The bill was drafted in efforts to provide cities with a mechanism to establish and achieve the goal of net 100% electric energy from renewable resources by the year 2030.
I don't
So-
think you meant to
Oh,
give
you
me
don't want
those.
those? I need those signed. If someone wants to sign them, you can sign them. So it is through this legislation that cities have the option to collaborate with Rocky Mountain Power to accomplish this goal. The bill outlines the role and rulemaking authority of the Utah Public Service Commission in approving a community program. And this program requires a resolution for city consideration and participation. So, this is kind of the basic timeline of the process. It's just a general timeline. There's obviously other steps in the middle. But we're right at the beginning of adopting a resolution. There would then be an agreement. There would be information pushed out to the public. There's an application that would have to be approved by the commission. And then, should the city choose, there would be an ordinance that would need to be adopted. And then Rocky Mountain Power would do some outreach with the public, letting them know how it would impact their bill. So, step one would be adoption of a resolution. And they're requesting that the adoption of this resolution take place by December 31st, 2019, which is this
Well,
month.
that's more than a request. if you wanna
Yes,
participate
it's, if you wanna
under the
participate,
current
it has to be
procedure.
done. Obviously, the resolution is just to establish the city's goal for the 100% renewable energy by 2030.
Renewable electric.
Yes, it's just, yes, electric energy. It does not require participation, so if you adopt the resolution, you still have the option to not participate by not passing an ordinance. However, any costs accrued throughout the process before the ordinance, that would, you'd still be required to participate in those costs, should you choose to pass the
So this was
resolution.
passed this last legislative session, but the gun to your head deadline.
We got this handed to us at COG just a couple of weeks ago. And an explanation to, and the request to have this done
That's
by.
why we've gone this route, because we felt your standards that does bring us information, and gives when we digest it very forward.
And to the point, I'll just kind of jump in for a second. I appreciate obviously the fact that they're looking and considering these renewable energy options. The biggest concern I have is that there's no estimation on what this actually is gonna cost.
Right.
For a city to participate. And the structure that it has is for those that do choose to participate and move forward with it, again, there's an opt-out for cities moving forward. Again, they're still can be responsible for some of the costs, but all that does is when a city opts out, is all it does is those that are in, it just shifts all that burden to those folks. So it's, like I said, I get the intent, but I think that there's way too many unknowns at this point
And there are some cities that.
for us to consider as a city to opt in.
But there's a lot of cities that are
In
not
fact, here,
adamant, they're not.
I
going
can
with
just
us.
Cities
move
that you would
forward
I
a
think
little
we
bit,
can move
maybe.
forward a little bit.
And I'm like, hello, can I move forward?
It's moving.
Park City,
Okay.
Our city did qualify.
You've got
These
the
are the
list.
cities that have approved it.
There you go.
Now, everyone that says pre-411, those are actually the cities that helped put this all together. So they approved this before the bill even passed.
That's just like
It is energy effective.
They didn't say energy.
It's opting out.
It is opting out. It's like, do you know what time it is?
So this is,
the wind's not blowing, sorry.
So, Eagle Mountain, South Jordan, and Layton have discussed it and have not adopted a resolution at this time. They still have.
And when you think about
They have one more meeting.
144 something cities in the state, that's what you
It's a
got.
small list.
this is what I think about it. I think
Draper
it's
is not
really, really
participating.
good to try and do our best to be responsible stewards and be concerned.
Yeah.
Just be good, right? Be good stewards. But here's what it says. Renewable electric energy. Do you know how many different forms of energy there are that are possible? And so we're just saying, we're just gonna make sure we only focus all of our time, energy, resources, everything only on that one little tiny thing of electric energy. When there are so many brilliant minds in this world that can look in, what about hydro energy? What about all, there's
One
nuclear
specific
energy,
company that's gonna
there's
provide
tons of things. Why would we just zero in and tunnel vision into one thing?
And to your point, Sherry, the option has been for a long time and will continue to be there for residents to opt in to these types of programs on their own,
Exactly.
rather than,
Well, there's already a lot of these programs.
right, rather than a council or a community making that decision for them.
Well, and
Yeah,
some of
if you
it's,
passed ordinance, your residents are.
yeah.
Are in.
And some of it is based on things like, I heard part of the argument was clean air. Do you know what kind of carbon footprint is that one windmill has? Huge, right? Huge carbon footprint to create a windmill. So it's like, you have to look at the whole picture, not just the, but this is the end result, you know? There's so many unknowns.
Well, and it doesn't address local air quality. It's very broad. We have no idea what the cost of the study will be, what the cost of implementation is going to be. None of those items have been disclosed. So we've been trying to gather information, but there's,
There isn't
what
any.
you
Just
have
say
is.
yes and we'll tell you all the details later.
We'll work it out later.
And then that's basically what it is. If you pass the resolution, they will then give you the information.
Isn't
No.
this item moot at this point, because it has to be done by December 31st, we don't have any other meetings that we can do.
Oh, we felt like you used hash matters,
Yeah.
we have a meeting to swear someone in, that's
Not,
not until the sixth.
that's not until the 6th, we
Yeah.
don't.
Somebody's
We'll have
actually
to have
saying
a
this,
special
they feel like the state will see that a lot of people didn't pass it and they'll extend the time anyway.
I'm not saying.
I, at this point, you don't feel it's in the best, it's within our purview, or it's appropriate for us to.
So give us credit, they didn't try to cram it down your throat and have a resolution tonight on that, they felt like that you wanna work through it and give it some time to digest it.
Yeah, I can
That's why I said,
Any further input?
sum it up.
Ken did a great job.
It's a noble goal, but
Look
there's
at that,
no
I did
detail.
13 slides.
Like I
Free.
said, there's options for individuals that are passionate about it, for them to pursue on their own, but this type of a broad with so many unknowns is, I think is not a good option for our city.
To me, this is a kind of a blatant attempt to make everyone pay.
Yes.
Whether they want to.
Okay.
I'm glad we did what
Okay.
we were requesting.
Well, with that, we'll move on to 3.14 city manager updates.
Are none? Fantastic.
Let's go to close.
So,
Let me update you, it's 11:01.
two things, just wanted to tell you about the update on, we had too much chlorine in the water, and we're at for treasury was.
It is one that did, I have some class.
Yeah, which is fine. So, obviously it happened. What happened was we had a malfunction with a pump and a meter. So the meter was saying there was flow when there wasn't flow. And so it was injecting chlorine. So when the well did kick on, there was a slug of chlorine in there and pushed it into the tank. So it mixed itself in the tank and then obviously started going out to the system. So our operators responded to some calls. I can't remember the dates, but one evening, the next day, so they went out and tested. And what happened is when that happens, you have some slugs that will go out. It won't just be all one, you'll have slugs of chlorine because it's heavier than water, and so it'll go out in spurts. Does that make sense? Right. And so you'll have slugs that go in the system. They went out and tested it. They got some tests that were within our normal range, which is generally between 0.4 and 0.9 parts per million. And then they had a test that was a 1.1, which is a little high, but not uncommon. And so the next morning, our operators come back in and went right back to testing just to follow up to see what we can find. We started seeing some tests that were a little bit elevated up to around 2.0, which is uncommon for us, but not uncommon for some. So the maximum level you want in the water system is 4.0. We never reached that in any of our tests. So we started doing flushing. We went and determined what the problem was. Shut that off. The next step was we contacted the Division of Drinking Water and Health Department to let them know what was happening. They didn't seem concerned at that time. They said start flushing and doing tests, which we were already doing. We documented all of that. Started communicating with Tammy. We started pushing some information out. The net levels never reached anything that the Division of Drinking Water or the Health Department was concerned about. So we continued to test and flush. It took us about 3 days to get it all out because it started settling in cul-de-sacs and those types of things. So we'd go around, we'd get calls, we'd document those, go out to those areas, test it, flush it, and those things. So essentially, we've solved the problem now, obviously, and put some other safety factors in just so that it wouldn't happen again if we had the same similar issue. So we went through the process, and then we followed up with the county health department. They came out, inspected our facility, and didn't find anything that was concerning.
No, I appreciate it, and actually the questions that I've received has just been what caused it, but everyone who had spoke or I'd spoken to were impressed at the response, how quickly it got taken care of, how active things were going to try and address the situation.
So that was essentially, it. We had a meter that was showing flow that wasn't.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Second item is even quicker than that one. We got notice by letter, and will read it, but I'm not gonna read it. It might give me brain cramp tonight. But we did get our, notice of our 2018 CAFR report award. So good job, Tammy and Al, all involved in that. We'll get our coin or medallion that signified as that, and add it to our plaque. We have not missed one since Alan came on board, so. And Tammy, so, it's been a good team effort with the communication piece and then the finances, so. It is a great thing to do. People, cities don't have it, they're trying to get there. They know how difficult it is. We're proud that we keep on going back to it. So thank you, Alan. How's that? I'm done.
Awesome.
Oh,
Okay, with that, I will accept a motion to
Motion to
move
close everything,
into,
go home.
go into closed session.
We'll put close,